Hi there, my name is McKenna Matsurivong and I am a career coach with NCTC's Office of Career Services. Our team works with students one-on-one to provide coaching, classroom presentations, and workshops that help students understand fundamental concepts of professionalism. So this is kind of how I describe our work to students. Half of your education is academic or technical based. Your classes and your relationships and mentorships from your professors are meant to shape you into a person who has the qualifications for whatever position that you are reaching towards after graduation. But you can be the most skilled, the most talented student and still not be able to professionally communicate your qualifications, expertise, and important characteristics to your future employer in, let's say, a job interview or a networking event. So that's what Career Services is here for. If you are ever needing one-on-one coaching to go through things like portfolio creation, interview practice, career or major exploration, please feel free to contact us using the information on the screen. We'd be happy to work with you. But today we're going to be talking specifically about portfolio creation or resume and cover letter writing. So let's go ahead and get started. So first off, we're going to be thinking and talking about what a resume actually is. You can think of a resume as a personal marketing tool that provides employers with a summary of your qualifications, work experience, education, certificates, extracurricular activity that is relevant to the job that you are currently applying to. So that being said, not all resumes are going to look the same for a couple of reasons. Not all people are the same, and not all jobs are the same also. So the resume that you use for one job might not be the resume that you use for a subsequent job position. There are so many loads of information out there on the internet, from your parents, from your instructors, from your friends about what should go inside of a resume or what your resume should look like. And I'm here to streamline your ideas surrounding that topic. So one of the best place, if not the best place, for you to search for information to put into your resume or to decide which information is going to be most important to present about yourself is actually in the job description. So when looking at the job description, we want to really focus on the qualifications that they mention, buzzwords that are repeated, skills that they express a desire for, and maybe even the values that they state about their company. So if your qualification is a certificate in a certain area, a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, we don't want that information to be going at the very, very bottom when it's one of the first things listed on a job position. If the job description lists words such as, proficient in blank, highly experienced in blank multiple times, we might want to consider swapping out some of the words we've used in a previous resume to reflect those buzzwords that the job description is using. Same thing with skills. There's usually a portion of the job description that lists qualities of an ideal candidate. If you align with some of the skills listed in that job position, consider switching out some on your resume to, again, reflect what the job description says. And it's always a good idea, if you really want the job you're applying for, to get familiar with that company's values, with their mission statement, and adopt it as your own, in your own words, in your resume. So we'll get more specific about the contents of your resume, what should be written down in there. As I've said before, match the job description. There's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all resume. Research the employer. That's what I was saying about finding their mission statement, knowing their values, and communicating as if those values are shared by you as a future professional. And through all of this research, we're trying to get an idea of what the employer needs from this position. They want to know, through looking at your resume, through reading your cover letter, that you are going to be the most perfect person for this job. So it's really important for you to emphasize your strengths. There's no such thing as unskilled labor, so don't sell yourself short. A lot of the students I work with, when we're doing resume building, I look at their resume and I'm like, where is all of your job experience? I know you. I know that you've been working since you were 15 or 16. Why don't you have anything? And students are under the misinterpretation that any service industry work that you've done, any nannying, anything of that nature is not going to be applicable to their work as a nurse or a teacher or as a ranch manager, but that's just not true. There's always a way for you to tie in your past experience to the relevancy of this future job. So don't sell yourself short. Learn how to market yourself. Be intentional and descriptive with your words. Anticipate how your skills can fulfill their needs while downplaying your weaknesses or not even mentioning them at this point in the application process, and maximize instead what you do have. If you are missing 1 out of the 7 qualifications listed in this job description, don't highlight that. Instead, spend more time and energy maximizing and describing what qualifications you do have. So here we go, technical input on what the resume should actually look like. Because I'm sure if you have ever Googled resume template, there are millions of things that come up. We want you to be sure that you have the information you need to build yourself a strong resume. Because hiring managers, on average, only look at your resume for under 10 seconds before it goes into the interview pile or the trash pile. We want it to be as easy on the eyes as possible so you have a better chance of making it into the preferred group of those piles. So, easy to read font, Arial or Times New Roman, pretty much only, between 10 and 12 point font. We want to limit it to 1 page as best as possible because, like I said, they're not looking at it for a long time. They're not going to be sitting there close reading it. We want it to all be on 1 page so that it's a fast look for them. No grammatical or spelling errors, of course, so if that's not your strong suit, make sure that your resume goes through a couple rounds of peer review before you send it off. I'm happy to look at it. My team is. You can turn to a family member or a friend that you trust, but make sure that somebody else is reading it for you because our brains tend to skip over things that we don't want to see. And high quality paper is preferred whenever you're handing in a physical resume. For most jobs, you're going to be submitting them over the web, but if you are going into an interview, I would always recommend to bring it on a high quality printed paper. The Career Services office at all of the NCTC campuses have this. It's also pretty cheap to buy it at any store that sells office supplies. So come by and see us or get some of your own. But that's just a tip that helps you literally stand out in a stack of other people. So there are no resumes that look exactly the same, but all resumes should have certain elements of information to them. The first and most important, because it's at the very top of the page, is your header and personal information. So this is where you're going to put your full name, your city, state, and zip code. Your address is not necessary. I do not recommend to put that on your resume because it is one of those pieces of information that can lead to discrimination in some instances, so we want to avoid that, whether it's for the better or for worse. So city, state, and zip is fine. professional email, and your phone number. And one thing that I'll say, I tell this to all my students, if you're job searching, make sure that there's room in your email inbox and that your voicemail box has room as well. There's nothing more sad than whenever you see documents for a perfect candidate and you try to call them and you cannot leave them a message. So if you're job searching, make sure those two inboxes are empty or cleaned out, and make sure that you're checking them regularly. Next, we'll do summary of qualifications. So your summary of qualifications is the first example of your writing skills that your future employer is going to see. This is one of those sections that really needs some good peer review before you send it off. And you can think about this summary as an expression of your most unique, valuable, or important characteristics as an employee, as a worker. These sentences do not have to be full sentences. They can be fragmented, and we want to avoid using any I or me, any personal pronouns that are going to bog down the flow of this very brief summary. So this is an example. A dynamic esthetician with 2 years of experience delivering skincare and hair removal treatments to clients in a luxury spa. A proven track record of identifying ideal treatment methods based on individual needs. Adept at building rapport with clients and upselling cosmetic products. So most of you watching this might not be cosmetology students. If you want more personalized one-on-one help to build a summary of qualifications, you have your career services team to turn to, but this is a good example of what that might look like. Now, your education is super important as well. In the education section, you're going to list this information for each of your degrees or certificates. I would not necessarily put your high school degree on this section, because if you are a graduate of a college, it's inferred that you are going to already have a high school diploma or a GED equivalent. So for each school that you've been to, full name of your degree and major, so Associate of Applied Science in biology, or I don't know, English, I don't know, whatever. Full name of your school goes next. North Central Texas College would be your entry for this degree, of course. Location, again, just the city and state will be fine. Your graduation or expected graduation date, so it can just be August 2023, for example. Any GPA or honors that you are especially proud of. I tell students, usually if your GPA is 3.5 or lower, consider not inserting it on your resume. If you have some exemplary score, then that's the point in which you would consider putting that on there. But C's get degrees, so no shame either way. It's just a strategic move, and your decision is your decision. There is space for you to discuss any relevant coursework that you've completed in your program under this education entry, but we just need to make sure, if we are doing that, that it's very relevant and or outstanding information. So if you are a psychology major, or let's say if you're a nursing major, we're not going to put anatomy and physiology 2 on this relevant coursework section of our education, because you have to take that in order to be a nurse or to be a psychology graduate. So I hope that's a good example that I'm communicating. If you have taken, higher level coursework in a special topic of your field, maybe you'll put that under relevant coursework. But again, just be careful with what you put in there. We don't want it to take up too much room in your resume. Experience is going to be your most important section because it communicates your qualifications and your work history to the employer. So for each job that you've worked, we're going to put title, your job title, the name of your job, the company name, city and state, the dates that you worked there, And all of these jobs are going to be listed in reverse chronological order. So from the most recent job you've had down to the farthest away job that you've had. I remember that we're wanting to keep this all on one page as best as possible. So you really don't need to go too far back into your work history. I wouldn't put things from 2010 to 2015 on there since those years are super far away. But if you have worked a very, very relevant job that is similar to the one you're going for, you can consider putting it in. A lot of this is subjective and specific to the job that you're applying for, which I'm going to say a bunch of times, even though I've already said it already, because that's the main point of this whole presentation. But again, if you need help deciding what and what should not go in there, come to see us or ask a trusted friend. Your bullet points are sometimes what people struggle with the most when writing their resume. Because if you think about the jobs that you've done, for me personally, before I worked in higher education, I was in the service industry. So I could put things like customer service, open and closed restaurant. But there are so many stronger ways to go about writing those accomplishment statements. We want to talk about just that, your accomplishments, the results of the work that you did, the important duties that you were responsible for. It can include your practicum hours, if you've done salon hours, practicum hours, clinicals, anything like that can also go in your work experience. We just got to frame it correctly. Here on the left-hand side, you can see some examples of strong bullet point statements. And we're going to go into a whole section on writing those now. So when we're writing our bullet points, we don't want to start off with flimsy statements like I did, or I had, or I worked. Instead, we want to start off with strong action verbs that communicate the tasks that we accomplished. So if you have already finished this job and it's in the past, then you can say stuff like facilitated, executed, built, designed. And if it's a job that you're currently working in, then you'll say builds, facilitates, designs, present tense verbs. And for each of the bullet points that you write, I want you to think of covering these 4 components: skill, task, action, and result. So for each bullet point that you will want to write, this method doesn't necessarily work for every single idea that you have that you want to communicate, but it's good to keep it in mind to get you in the headspace of making sure that you cover a full range of information in your bullet points so that you're not writing statements that's just like open and close the restaurant every day. That's an example of a pretty weak statement. But here are 2 examples that cover all 4 of those components for you to consider. Handled 80 to 100 transactions on POS cash register daily, counted money at the end of the day to ensure the correct amount. Or designed client database using Microsoft Access, doubled speed of information retrieval. So after your bullet points for your work experience and all of those different job entries that share that really important, crucial information, there are a couple of other sections that you can feel free to add into your resume, but only if they are very relevant and intentional. So some examples of those sections can be languages. If you speak more than one language, please put that on your resume. That is a wonderful thing and can be valuable to any employer in any field that you work in. So that is an example of one that should always go on your resume, no matter what. Consider also communicating your membership to professional associations that might be regarded well in your field. Any volunteer experience or awards that, again, are relevant. So we're not going to be mentioning the soup kitchen days that we volunteered at in high school. We're not necessarily going to mention being on the honor roll in your senior year. We want recent things that are very much tied closely with the job that you're applying for. So again, A review of the necessary sections that go in every single resume, your personal information with your contact info, your name, all of that good stuff, your professional summary and skills that communicate the unique things about you as a candidate, your education, training, and certifications that talk about your qualification to apply for this job in the first place, and of course, your work experience. I know we've covered a lot so far, but I do want to give you some last minute tips to keep in mind while you're writing your own resume. Make your professional summary future oriented. We want to write that as if we're talking about how we're going to provide the best service to the team that we're wanting to join. Tailor your resume to the position you're applying to. Focus on your accomplishments. Never lie, especially if you're in a position where you're taking care of anything or anyone specifically. Short text and bullet points instead of lengthy paragraphs are much preferred, especially knowing how short amount of a time that employers are actually looking at your resume. Again, we want it to be a quick, easy glance, not something that they have to spend a lot of time reading closely. Do not include your picture in your resume. That's one of those things that can be used as an excuse for discrimination, whether that's good or bad, and we want to avoid that completely as best as we can. Review, and then have someone else review, like me or like a mentor, preferably somebody who has a lot of experience looking at these things, and make every word intentional. We have to be choosy here. We don't want to say anything that's taking up too much space or that doesn't have a direct benefit or purpose in communicating who we are to these employers. I mentioned this earlier, but I wanted to have a slide dedicated in this presentation to talk to you about submitting your resume electronically. So there are many instances, depending on which field you work in, where you might be handing in your resume in person to a hiring manager, but for a lot of fields and a lot of different careers, job applications are virtual or electronic these days. So whenever you're submitting your resume over the web, make sure you save your file in an easy to recognize name. No like unnamed download (1). We want it to say, like for example, Matsurivong resume 2023. Something that has your name in it and that clearly identifies this document as a resume. Save it as a PDF. Saving it as a Word document can sometimes jumble the words and the style around if they're using a different application than you used to make it, but saving it as a PDF will freeze the page just as you see it to make sure that the employer sees it the way that you wanted it to be seen. For job applications online, if you need to copy and paste your resume, be careful when copying bullets. So there are a lot of job application sites where you have to attach your resume, but they also make you go through and write out that information into their own little boxes. If you've seen one of those before, you know what I'm talking about. It can be super annoying, but be careful to use dashes or semicolons instead of copying pasting your whole entire set of bullet points, because they'll run together sometimes and lose their formatting. And if you email your resume to a hiring manager, include the job title or the job code in the subject line so that they know what you're emailing them for and that it's not some random spam that was mass emailed to a whole bunch of companies or anything like that. References. This is another big part of your portfolio. And when we talk about your portfolio, we mean your resume, references, and cover letter. So references are going to be on a sheet completely separate from your resume. The resume only needs to be one page. We don't need to add anything on there that's going to make it run over. So having your references on a different page is the best way to do it. Putting references available upon request in your resume is not necessary at all. Prepare the names, addresses, phone numbers, and email addresses of 2 to 4 references. You can provide them when they're asked during the application or after the interview. And you must always have permission to use somebody as a reference before you do so. Nothing worse than getting a cold call in the middle of your workday and saying, hey, can you verify the dates of employment for Jane? And you're like, Jane, I haven't talked to Jane in a year. I didn't know she was using me. The employers who are calling can sense the shock in somebody's voice when they're not prepared to answer that question. So make sure you're always reaching out before you're using somebody as a reference. Provide the references with your resume so that they can review before they get contacted. So whenever you're calling these people who are going to be your references to say, hey, do you mind if I put you down for this job application? I'm going to go ahead and send you my resume as well, just in case you need a refresher on what I've been up to. That's how I framed it in the past. And of course, notify them that they might be receiving a call soon. Okay, so next we are going to be covering effective cover letter writing, which is very different than resume writing in a lot of different ways. So a cover letter is a one-page document that is typically sent to employers alongside your resume. The cover letter, just like the resume, should always be tailored to fit a specific job description, and it's going to include information about your skills and experiences that, again, are relevant to the job you are applying for. But this is an expansion of your resume. It is not a word-for-word repeat. Your resume reflects your aptitude to a hiring manager. It does not reflect your passion, your philosophy, your personality, which are all very important parts to gaining employment as well. So this is another opportunity for you to showcase those things as well as your communication skills. So this is an example of what a cover letter should look like. We're going to go through the different sections just like we did for the resume part of the presentation. So there are 4 to 5 different sections of each cover letter. They're all going to look different, but there are some general categories of information that should be covered in every cover letter that you write. You'll see as we're going through this presentation, the resume writing is pretty calculated. There's a formula for these things. There's a format that you present your information in. There are hacks to writing your bullet points, but for your cover letter, it's much more subjective. So I have a lot less rules for the cover letter, but maybe some more advice. So every cover letter should have a header and a greeting, just like your resume did. Bonus points if you use the same header from your resume in your cover letter so that your portfolio looks like a seamless, clean, cohesive set of documents. And then we're going to get into your paragraphs. So I have on here that 1 to 3 paragraphs is recommended, but the information that goes in them is necessary. So your paragraphs need to cover an introduction, an expression of interest, a discussion of your relevant skills and educational/professional accomplishments, and it needs to end with a closing and a signature. So let's get started on getting into those different paragraphs. So your header and greeting, of course, same stuff as the resume. Name, address, city, state, zip only, email, phone number, the date that you're writing the letter on, and then also the contact information for the hiring manager or for the company that you're applying to. So the name of the job description's point of contact, the point of contact's job title, the company address, company contact info, and a professional greeting to the recipient. if you don't know the information for this kind of stuff, if it's not easy to find on the job description or on the company's website, it's okay to leave out some or most of this information. The professional greeting to the recipient should always say, "Dear Mr., Dear Miss," or "Dear Hiring Manager," "Dear Hiring Committee." If you don't know the gender of your potential recipient of the resume and cover letter, it's safe to just go with "Dear Hiring Committee" is what I would recommend to you. So paragraph 1 is going to be your introduction. This is where you, of course, are going to introduce yourself. My name is McKenna Matsurimong, and express your interest in obtaining employment with the company. Please take this letter as an expression of my interest in applying for the success coach position that is available on your Gainesville campus. That's an example. That would be my example. Here we're going to name the specific position or type of work for which you're applying, and you may mention how you learned of the opening or what knowledge you have of the employer as well. So your second and third paragraphs, you can have you could just have one paragraph explaining these things. You could have 2 paragraphs explaining these things, but we want to make sure that we discuss your relevant skills, your education and experience. Remember that we are not repeating things that are on our resume. We're expanding on them. We're providing details and information about about what's on your resume that you weren't able to fit on there. So as I said before, a lot of people are under the impression that your cover letter is the same as your resume and that there is a specific format and style and kind of robotic flow to how you write it, but that's just not true. Your cover letter is an opportunity for you to showcase information that makes you stand out, to show off your writing skills, and to describe your passion for the industry, your why for choosing this work, the philosophy with which you approach your work. So these sentences are super important in describing your personality to your future employer, because that's just as important in a lot of scenarios as is your qualifications. So don't be afraid to sound like yourself. Again, some people, if you are just wanting this job to get by, if it's something you're interested in but it's not your dream job, you might write 1 paragraph to discuss your skills, education, and experience. But for me, example, in this position, I did write the full 2 paragraphs on the relevant skills and my education and experience because it was something that I really was passionate about. I had a lot to say about why I wanted this job and why I would be a good fit. So again, this is very subjective. I don't have many rules. I just have a lot of guidance to give on these things. Oh, and of course, you can, I'm going crazy with my slide clicking right now, but since this is a virtual presentation, please feel free to pause and take screenshots and read these examples closely. You don't have to write exactly like this person did, but they're a good example of how people approach these different paragraphs. So the ending will be, of course, a closing and a signature. Mention your desire to meet with the employer. You might want to advise them of your flexibility to the time and place. Include day and evening contact information. Be sure to communicate your plan to follow up. Thank them for their time, and end the letter with a professional closing statement and sign off with your name, like "Sincerely, McKenna." Sincerely, Leo Lyon. Some tips to leave you with before you close out of this presentation and call it a day. Like I was saying earlier, it's a much more flexible and subjective process than writing a resume. So a lot of people don't necessarily need help on the resume, but they really like assistance on the cover letter. That's what I'm here for. Please let me help you if you're feeling confused or nervous or lost after watching this presentation. Sometimes it makes more sense to combine paragraphs 2 and 3. Other times it doesn't. do what's best for you in this situation. And remember, if nothing else, the rater is going to consider this an example of your writing skills. So be careful before you submit this to make sure that it looks good and correct to eyes that are not your own. Show them who you are at your passionate and professional best. That is a very simplified way of describing the purpose of this letter. So, before I said this at the last screen, but really before I leave you, I want to introduce you to a new platform that Career Services just got access to. It's called Skills First. So if you need help creating your resume or cover letter, or even if you have one already but you need help converting it to fit a new job description, or just editing it since it's been sitting in your Google Drive for a couple of years, this is a great platform for you. So you don't have to create an account or anything. Just go to your one login. You'll see it listed in your apps. Click on it and you'll be taken straight to the platform where you can find hundreds of professional templates to customize. So this platform is equipped with technology to help you create or edit documents that are tailored to your unique experience and prospective job searches. We, as in your career coaches, are able to review and provide feedback on the documents that you create in there. So if you're not able to make it into an appointment with us, this is a good way for you to still access our feedback in the tools that we have to offer. So if you're interested, go click around in there. It's a really fun platform, and I think you might be pretty impressed by the technology that it utilizes to get the job done. And that's all, folks. Thank you so much for being with me virtually here today. I hope that you took something valuable away from this message. I know that it can be difficult to stay engaged with a virtual lecture, so thanks for sticking around. Please scan this QR code and acknowledge that you attended this presentation. It helps for my reporting and for your professor as well. And keep in mind that I am talking to you through the screen, but I'm a real person who's here on the Gainesville campus. I can be reached through email or phone call if you need any support understanding or processing or practicing the lessons that we learned today. So if you need me, you know where to find me, and thanks again for being with us today.